while still respecting its history and its residential community, which is very significant here. The initial plans that were developed after 2003 called for 6 new residential towers around the perimeter of Lenox Terrace, varying heights up to about 310, 315 feet. And those plans were the subject of a lot of back and forth, and a lot of discussions, and a lot of conversations over a number of years in the community. Fast forward to October of 2017, and this team presented an updated plan for Lenox Terrace at the Schomburg Center to the resident community. And that plan basically does things like limit all the heights of the buildings to the height of Harlem Hospital at 284 feet, eliminates the 6-tower building, and it added about 6 acres of open space, and a lot of substantial new amenity rooms and other substantial benefits for the existing Lenox Terrace community. Providing improvements to existing buildings and apartments as well, not just building new, but improving the existing. Since then, we've been hard at work working on the rezoning application itself and doing all the environmental review studies. They continue to this day, and we hope in the next couple of months we're going to wrap those up and be able to move into the formal public review process. And that work is anticipated to commence this fall. We're going to begin negotiations on a tenant benefits agreement with the tenants. We hope to begin those this summer and continue to talk about that and complete prior to final approval of the project. And so some of the themes we've been working with over the number of years for Lenox Terrace was looking at the existing site and what can we do to really improve things and make things function better inside and out. One is something Max Bond initially identified, very important to this day, is that paved parking and parking on site might have been state-of-the-art in the late 50s. Right now, it's not the best use of a lot of your interior space in and amongst your buildings is for private automobiles to park their cars and have it all paved. And so what can we do to improve that? The existing retail there is essentially the same retail that was built over 60 years ago. It's now providing limited options for residents, and the buildings are becoming dated, and some of it's vacant, some of it's not even in existence anymore due to fires. How can we improve the retail? The buildings, back when they were built in the late 50s, there was really no such thing as residential amenities, as gyms, as community rooms. What can we do to improve amenities for residents in the buildings? And finally, there are a lot of the in-place tenant community at Lenox Terrace. A lot of people have been there for 20, 30, 40 or more years. A lot of them have original kitchens and bathrooms, and they've obviously become dated. How can we improve existing apartments? And so the plan that we're presenting, this is just an overall summary. I'll go into a little more depth after this. 2 components. One, strengthen the core of the existing Lenox Terrace. Over 6 acres of new landscaped open space. Improvements to existing apartments, renovations to existing buildings and lobbies, new building amenities for everybody to use, both in new buildings and in the existing Lenox Terrace buildings for people who live there. Strengthen the core and what's there now and what's formed the heart of Lenox Terrace in the past 60 years. Enliven the streets around Lenox Terrace. We're going to be showing you 5 new buildings built at the corner of the Lenox Terrace property, new street-level retail throughout, on all of the streets, primarily focusing on Lenox Avenue, on 5th Avenue, and
Malcolm
on X. And very important here is that the existing and the new rise together in our project. Upgrades, so 2 important things. So one is first is a reality, and the other is a commitment. The reality is that if you want to substantially upgrade the existing campus and the existing apartments and the existing buildings, you've got to figure out a way to make that work, especially if you're not going to raise rents in exchange for doing it. So we've got to figure out how to have that happen. So basically, without doing some revenue stream, development of new buildings or another stream, you can't do substantial improvements to existing campus and buildings. However, and this is the commitment, the development of the new buildings will not happen without the upgrades to the existing buildings. It's a synergy that has to happen, and both things have to work together. With regard to that second point, we're going to put our commitments in an agreement with the residents. Right? We are not asking you to trust what these words on the screen that we're presenting to you here, or that we'll present to you in September at the next committee meeting, but we're going to memorialize this. We will create a tenant benefits agreement, and we will come to an agreement that basically lays it out in an enforceable fashion. Okay, so look at the new development specifically and orient you to the site plan a little bit. So 5 new buildings at the corner, and I'm just going to point that out. They come up in the darker orange there. They're essentially the 4 corners and then the corner of Lenox Terrace Place. those buildings will be marked at the datum of Harlem Hospital. So the roof of Harlem Hospital is sort of the metric and the contextuality that we hold to, and nothing goes higher than Harlem Hospital. We anticipate over 1,600 new housing units to be built in these buildings, and we anticipate a minimum of, and likely more than 400 units of affordable housing to come online in conjunction with these buildings. Much needed affordable housing for the community. Along Lenox Avenue itself,
Malcolm X!
to the screen.
Damn it,
So
this is getting on
we're
my
looking at a
nerves.
6-story podium building that will connect the two towers, and that's intended to reflect the contextuality of Lenox Avenue right across the street.
Malcolm X!
Please.
Please stop.
She's correct.
It's a code name and not a real name.
Now, what's wrong with you?
And so right across here, you've got two towers on the corners, 132nd and 135th. And then connecting them right here, this is a 6-story podium building. And so 6 stories will be the podium of this tower and this tower, and will be the building in front of 470 will be limited to 6 stories in total. Right, that's the podium across that tower.
On my nerves.
And so with respect to the amenities, the new buildings are designed to have a substantial amenity package. Things such as roof decks, kids' playrooms, yoga studios, community rooms, gyms, and game rooms. Everything open to every resident of Lenox Terrace. Whether you live in the new units that get built, whether you live in the existing development that's there now, everybody gets access to all the amenities. We looked a lot at ways to put amenities in the existing buildings, but it's really difficult because basically you've got residents in most buildings that are all the way down to the ground level. If you're not going to empty apartments to create amenity rooms, you really can't do a whole lot. So what we decided is the best bet, start new, build these amenity rooms in the new buildings and open them up to everyone. The existing sidewalk and retail experience, this is looking north up Lenox from about 134th Street to Harlem Hospital in the background. This will be converted and all new retail will be built into the base of the new buildings. It allows us to bring Class A retail here, new restaurants, new pharmacies, a new high-quality grocery store, build new space to revitalize the whole perimeter of Lenox Terrace. This is the existing sidewalk next to the church at 135th and Lenox, looking southeast at the subway. This is where Pan Pan used to be. A new building would rise here, and we think this is actually an ideal location for a new supermarket, high-quality grocery store right outside the subway. As far as the neighborhood retail development goes, on the site plan you'll see it in orange, outlined there. It's about 160,000 square feet, a little less than doubling the amount of retail that's there now. That retail we anticipate will be small to mid-sized local retailers. These are not configured to be big box stores. We don't anticipate that these will be huge retailers. They'll be basically street depth to 70 or 100 feet and split up into smaller portions. Something like a supermarket may be a little bigger, and actually some stores may go either down to the cellar level or up to the second floor to allow us to expand the retail footprint a little bit. But generally, it's not intended to go deep into the inside of the property. It will stay on the perimeters. The existing parking layout. Right now there are about 420 spaces, and much of the interior of the site, while you've got some nice mature trees, it's all asphalt on the ground level, other than some small areas of grass. The goal here is basically to transform all this paved space, which is in gray, all over here, without losing any parking spaces, right? And how can we do that? Well, what we're planning to do is to move the parking, the vast majority of the parking, to one level below grade in a garage that will span from 135th to 132nd along Lenox, and in two cellar garages in the cellar at the southeast corner and the northeast corner at 132nd to 135th. It allows us to add about 105 parking spaces. Everybody who's got a space now gets a space in the new development and at no additional cost to them versus what they're renting for now. What that lets us do is convert the existing central parking lot to a green space over 6 acres of lawns. Driveways and parking spaces can become walkways, pedestrian paths, lots of seating areas. It can become playgrounds. It can become mostly passive recreational space. But there is a substantial older community here that we think there's a lot of seating would be really good, and a lot of passive recreation would be really good here. Going into the buildings proper, We're looking at the lobby renovations for every single building and every single lobby at Lenox Terrace. So we convert those, open them up, add more glass to the front, perhaps expand out a bit, and really tremendously improve, bring those lobbies into the 21st century. Going into apartments proper, we plan to upgrade kitchens, bathrooms, and hallways. So what we're committing to is that all residents with a kitchen older than the year 2000. The reason we landed on 2000 is around 2000, the Olnick organization, when apartments became vacant, they were renovating apartments and basically replacing appliances in the kitchens and bathrooms. So most of those pre-2000s or post-2000s have been renovated. But if you are in an apartment with a kitchen before 2000, you'll get a kitchen upgrade and renovation at no charge. Residents with a bathroom older than the year 2000, bathroom upgrade and renovation at no charge. All of the hallways will be renovated. New lighting, new paint, new carpeting, top to bottom, every floor, every building gets renovated. Current residents' rent will not be increased to pay for the renovations, right? So it's not as though we take this and we pass on the costs. The new development allows us to do all the substantial renovations without influencing the cost and the rent of anybody's apartment. And the renovation also will happen at the same time as the new construction. When we build the building over here, you're in a building next door, everything gets renovated. We can't get a TCO for that building, a certificate of occupancy for that building, until all of the improvement work is done. As far as what we've been doing over the past 2 years or so, after the October 27th town hall meeting, we've done extensive ongoing outreach to all the residents in 2018 and 2019. We've had meetings with building captains in all the buildings. We've had building-specific presentations of the detailed plan to every building at Lenox Terrace, answering questions, going back and forth in forms that are a little smaller than large town halls, so people are more comfortable to dive into questions and answers. And we've had one-on-one conversations with over 1,700 Lenox Terrace residents. We've knocked on every single door multiple times at Lenox Terrace, and if you were willing to talk to us, we would talk to you about the plan and hear all of your concerns or what you're excited about with regard to the plan. We have begun and continue to maintain a dialogue with the new leadership of LT Act. I put that up there not to imply that LT Act has endorsed the project or has agreed to the project, but just that we are maintaining a dialogue. We want to keep talking, and we want to keep this dialogue going all the way through the approval process to make sure we reach a conclusion that everybody is happy with. As far as the technical components here, we're seeking about 4 different zoning actions through this process with the city. The first is, right now, it's zoned a paired R district residential with a commercial district. So it's an R and a C. We'd be rezoning to something called a C62. While that has a C in the front, I want to make sure that everybody knows that our commercial development here will be limited to a maximum amount of square footage of commercial that we can't go over. So while it's a C zone, a commercial zone, we will be limited in the amount of commercial, and I'll tell you how in a second. It'll be designated as a mandatory inclusionary housing area, which means it's guaranteed that we will be providing between 25 and 30% of the units that are built new as affordable housing pursuant to the city's MIH program. We're seeking a special permit for a large-scale general development. Basically, what this lets us do is it lets us build the new buildings as close to the street as possible and as far away from the new buildings as possible. It lets us go higher than you would ordinarily go at the street without setting back, and so we're seeking some relief from the zoning to do that. Height and setback relief. So what the special permit also does is it controls the envelope and the permitted uses in square footages here, which means of the 130 or so thousand square feet of commercial or retail that we're proposing above grade, we are limited to that number, right? We cannot then get our approval and then come and build office buildings here and build large amounts of commercial use over and above what we're showing you today. We're also seeking a special permit to reduce the required parking, and that's to facilitate affordable housing. If you were to build this from scratch, you'd have to build 4 parking spaces for every 10 units. We would like to reduce that so we don't have to keep parking at the surface. We can convert that into green space and open space while still guaranteeing that everybody that has a parking space now gets a parking space in the future. We're also asking for an authorization to modify some curb cut requirements because some of the new loading docks, we want them off street. We want to have a curb cut to get into the new garage. They're only allowed a certain number on the street frontage, so we're seeking to have some more. We see the approval process moving forward as follows. Currently, we are doing our environmental impact statement, the draft, which we hope will be complete and ready for public review in a couple months. That's underway. We received a lot of productive comments at the scoping session that happened about a year ago at City Planning. We're incorporating those comments and enlarging the scope of studies to respect those comments. We anticipate coming back to this board in the fall to have the first formal public hearing in the ULIP process on this project. So after that, and after the borough president comes right after the community board, and then the city planning commission hearing in late 2000, city council in early 2020. We anticipate that we'll begin construction in late 2020 or early 2021, and I'll use that as the pivot point to introduce Sean O'Connor from Hunter Roberts, who's going to talk a little bit about building it and some of the controls with regard to air quality and noise, and a way of reducing impacts on the residents.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for having us tonight. So I have the maybe unenviable position of telling you guys how great construction is and how the noise and the air quality issues will not be something that will impact how you guys so one of the first things that we want to touch on, and listen, there's a lot of topics that come around the construction industry and how we do what we do, but we tried to highlight tonight two of the major components really revolving around the air quality and the noise and how we can mitigate that and be as least impactful as possible on your day-to-day lives here. So from an air quality perspective, first phase of the project would consist of some demolition of the existing structures that are there. The structures that are there are one-story structures. So I don't want to neglect in any way the pedestrian or the safe access of the people that live locally. That I can certainly answer those questions for you if you have them when we're done here tonight. But one of the things that we talk about when we're doing that demolition is how do we mitigate the dust and all the other stuff that goes along with it. Some of the measures that we take when we do this, it's limited demolition in that it is one story, but please, I'm not going to mislead you. There is dust that's created when we're doing what we're doing. You've seen hosing down or watering. The constant watering of that will be done as we go. Netting and scaffolding is required by the New York City Department of Buildings, so that would all be taking place as we go. The building would be gutted from the inside, and then we would remove the structures as we go to keep things, the dust under control. Electric powered equipment really reduces the use of generators and emissions that happen on site. So one of the focuses that we'll have as we go through the project is really how do we get the permanent power and the utilities into the project as quickly as possible so we can get onto the electrical service and not have to use generators and other stuff that are going to increase the fumes. Some of these stuff may not make sense, low sulfur fuel diesel generators and using equipment that meets or exceeds EPA emission standards. That's pretty standard in what we do on a day-to-day basis, but we would certainly look to exceed that as we went. Idling time in trucks. So obviously with what we are doing, the truck traffic is going to increase in the neighborhood for sure. Idling time is something that we're not going to tolerate, right? So they come to the site, if we're not ready to take them in or they're moving around, there's no, it will not be tolerated that they're just going to park on the roadway and use that idling time to continue to put out the emissions. So we would control that. We have security, we have flagmen that are constantly out throughout the neighborhood controlling that process. Continuous watering of the structure and excavations. I spoke about this. One of the things that we do is through the use of water trucks or through tying into existing hydrants or water services to constantly water down the site. When we're doing the process, there's going to be dust that's going to create it. So for us, it's a constant process of making sure the structure and the grounds remain wet so we're not circulating dust into the air. Another thing that we do is as trucks leave the site, we're going to continuously water them down and wash them within the site fence so we're not polluting the streets. Water them down so they're not taking debris out as they leave the site and then taking it out to the roadways. And then covering all loads, again, I don't want to downplay this, but it is common in what we do now that everything is covered as a piece of site so it's not trailing dust as we continue to leave the project. Now from a noise control perspective, obviously construction brings with it, the activities create noise. And again, that's something that we're going to look to mitigate as we go. The demolition process is, I know it sounds like an onerous task, but the noise can be controlled and a lot of it is done within the structure. And then as we're removing the exterior facades, those really just come down. But the pile driving process, so what that is once the site's cleared, we then drive into the ground or drill into the ground some foundation elements, usually consist of steel pipe or steel beams, and that could be a continuous banging of these structures to get them into the ground. The way it's setting up right now, the foundations, there is some play in that things that we can be, or options that we can consider to reduce this. If we do get into that process of using piles, there are devices that we can put onto the pile driving rigs that are shrouds or mufflers that can reduce that sound. The working day in New York City is typically, from a construction industry, anytime between 7 and 2:30, 7 and 3:30. Building department does allow at certain times work to continue to 6:30 p.m. And as far as weekend work, there's a process that we have to go through to get the approvals. That if you were to go ahead and do that at this point, that's not in the plan, but it's certainly a possibility. I talked about the mufflers and sound reducing equipment. We're always into current technologies, and the industry is continuing to progress, so there are options. As was mentioned, as we get into late 2020, early 2021, of the possibility that this could even get better. And certainly from if it got to the standpoint where we had to build barriers around certain pieces of equipment to continue to further reduce the sound, we could certainly do that. And I mentioned the pile driving rigs and the shrouds with the noise barriers and whatnot. So, listen, we're very proactive. The last thing that we want to do is get into a situation where we have to react or respond to your complaints. We want to stay ahead of it. So we're going to do everything we can to be proactive and try and reduce any complaints or issues that you may have before they arise. So that again, that's our intent.
So while that ends the formal part of the presentation, one of the reasons why we wanted to make sure to come back to this committee before the summer was that we wanted to hear about questions, about concerns. We may not have all the answers today, but we want to be prepared so that when we come back here in a couple of months, we will have the answers. And so we just want to open it up for any questions.
So, the board members are going to take questions, and I know your comments. Board members. Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. I see, because being on the board from once it started, so we went through this whole process. So I actually want to commend the fact that you've taken some of the things that have been said and taken into consideration and come back with something that I'm pleased with. With you, the 6:30 stopping of the workday, I mean, it's 3 o'clock ordinarily, so you have to get some kind of special waiver.
Norm, and I should have made, I
Yeah,
apologize, I should have made that clear.
Yeah.
The normal day for us is going to be a 7 o'clock to 3:30 day.
Right.
There are situations where, we get a midday storm, or there's something, something's happening where we just need to extend the day a bit, but that would certainly not be the norm.
Not the other one. Thank you very much.
For sure.
Hello, everybody. Stanley Blue. Sorry I'm late. Can you just go back to your to the slide with the one before? You do
Sure.
Charles.
Yes.
Charles here from Olnick, and I'd just like you to give us your comments on these two, the air quality controls, and just the whole information part.
What it looks like right now, he's doing it correctly. So he's even got the low sulfur diesel machinery to reduce the amount of carbon emissions. He's going to be watering down. I would say that they have done their homework.
Something we did not mention, I want to mention, is that we will be establishing a 24-hour construction hotline for all residents, both on site and off the site, that will be manned 24 hours. Right, and so question, you won't have to rely, you could certainly call 311, but you will not have to solely rely on calling 311, it'll be manned.
I'm sorry, I didn't introduce Charles. We're at Charles Calloway from here. Please forgive me. I'm sorry, and Charles Calloway is the person who works with us on our projects to make sure that these
Environmental issues are safe. So I do have one question that you mind me asking. The other question is that, have you done your complete environmental impact study or your environmental assessment study?
So we have not, and I know that there are actually questions from a number of board members as to the conclusions and can they get a copy. This is still in process, right? So everything is in draft form. Hopefully in about 2 months, we will have a full document that's finished and ready for review. So I'm not comfortable going into conclusions because they're not quite done.
Right, because there's a couple of issues around the northern part, because there are some brownfields over there, so I don't know if the balloon has spread enough and got under Lenox Terrace. So we definitely have to look at that.
Yeah, there will be, all the available environmental studies will be available as appendices to the EIS, and there's a discussion of hazardous materials.
Okay.
How are you working with the church across
So there are 3, I'll go back to the site plan because there might be other questions from the site plan too. Yeah, it was sold a couple of years ago, or a year and a half ago maybe, and so you're talking about this church right there, right? Yeah. So right. So the AME church. Here we go. So for other people who are not as familiar with the site, I sort of glossed over it. I should be clear. There are 3 properties in this super block that we do not own. Right. So this is the large Kennedy Center right in the middle of Lenox Terrace Place. There's the Parks Department Recreation Center, Hansborough, and there's the AME church, which is the only, well, I guess it's now a for-profit entity, right? This was purchased, and we had heard that they were going to commence construction of a 12-story or so building. We have made a lot of outreach to that new ownership team, and they're right next door to us, and as you can see, we're building on both sides of them. And so we want to establish a dialogue. We've had a lot of trouble getting response from that team and a dialogue as to what their plans really are. So we don't have a lot of information to share with you about what their plans are. We don't know if they're going to build now, if they're waiting to build, we just don't know.
You said that you have had problems getting to
It's not, I mean, we have contact numbers, but they're not very responsive. They don't have a lot of interest in establishing a dialogue with the Olnick organization.
So what impact, well, we're asking that we want to know the impact of whatever they're building is going to have on the water, so.
And vice versa, right? So it's actually worth mentioning. As part of our environmental impact statement that's studying the impacts from soup to nuts of the whole project, we're assuming that they build pursuant to this new zoning scheme, right? So we're assuming a building that's actually larger than 12 stories on that parcel. I'm not sure exactly what the height we're assuming is, but we're assuming they build there in conjunction with us, and so we have assessed the cumulative impacts of both those. Since we didn't have a specific development plan for them, we've just inserted like the height and setback the zoning would allow, and assumed, okay, that's X number of units, Y amount of square footage, and we're assuming that goes forward. We don't know if it will or not.
And the reason why I'm saying that is because all of the projects that they're buying and developing, it's the same issue. So it really needs to be, I'm talking about, boy, it really needs to be looked at. I mean, I know who they are, but it really needs to be looked at because each of their sites, they're not really corresponding or talking to the community, which is not your issue, but it would be, it would be better for everybody to know what's going on. Yeah. I'm sorry, Lisa's chairing this meeting. Go on.
Yes.
Then we'll go.
So, you said, the gentleman from WEAC, you said that they have done their due diligence when it comes to environmental impact. So this is a project that is going to be construction on a property, a 3-square block property where about 4,000 people presently live, and the projected span of time for the project's completion is 8 to 10 years. So what does WEAC have to say about people living in that kind of a construction zone over that length of time as far as the health impacts?
All right, so as far as the health impacts, the state allows a certain amount of things that you can do in that process, right? And it's a 10-year span, we totally understand it. But I cannot predict any health impacts of the noise that people may have, or only thing we're concerned about is making sure that the chemicals and the stuff that they're doing on the site is below state regulations.
Okay.
Okay, so I cannot say that, like for instance, the low
So that
sulfur.
that would be a question for, that's
a whole new study. That's a whole new
different
study. That's a whole new study. When I say that whole new study, because project like this has not happened on a site in the middle of the city in a long, and forever.
Exactly.
This is the first one. All right, but I will say this. When we did the Mother Clara Hill bus depot, right, the one at 146th Street,
Yes.
it took us 7 years to do that bus depot. What we did was making sure that all these standards and all these regulations was followed to the T and make sure they were below those standards. And we had air monitors up there to make sure that they did not get polluted, because that's when our gardens is right next door to,
Right.
Yeah,
right. And we made sure that those things were happening properly.
So would you suggest that that kind of a study happen here?
We can, yeah, you can do that. You can actually, you can do an air monitoring study, making sure that they monitor air on a regular basis and make sure that.
Before the project goes through.
Yes, you can do that. You can actually set up.
Because after it's through ULURP, it's not gonna, it doesn't make
You
sense,
can-
so, I mean, before.
You can actually set up a air monitor study right now to know what the air is at this moment in time.
Okay.
And then during the process, you can regulate the air to make sure that they don't go above beyond of what is expected. Okay? And if they do go above and beyond, they should be able to shut it down and come back to you and say, we have to go about it a different way. All right, so you can actually set that up at now, because you have what, 10 years? Well, how long was the one project going to start?
We anticipate a 7-year construction period starting in late 2020.
So you can actually do an air monitoring, I'll finish it. You can do an air monitoring study right now to see what the air impact is at the community right now. And during construction, you can actually, you can monitor it during the whole process, so that way you know that it's not impacting the community.
What was implemented, when you say you, who you referring to?
The developer, or get an outside developer, or you can go get Queens College has an air monitoring group, so you can actually do that with Queens College. There's Professor Holger, the city has an air monitoring, just like they do at the North River Sewage Treatment Plant, right? Because they have air monitors out there making sure that those fumes are not what they're supposed to be. So you can actually set that up at this moment in time while there's no construction going on. Get the air samples, know what it is, understand that this is the air level, and when they do construction, you can always continue to air monitor the project to make sure they don't go over certain levels in that process.
The reason why I'm asking the question is because before you go into a ULURP process, there needs to be some information or some study as to what the effect will be on the people before you even get the project approved. And that's what I'm suggesting.
No, you can do that fine. The statement doesn't.
So just to give you,
Is that part of the is that part of the typical environmental study?
No, it's not part of the
It's not.
But the other stuff.
Yeah, I'm talking about it.
right, so, actually, you're correct. The details of a monitoring study, are not in the draft environmental impact statement, but what is we have air quality analyses, we will have it, in the draft environmental impact statement with regard to two different phases. Operation, right, when all the boilers are up at the roofs of the buildings, when all the new cars are driving around the neighborhood, right, from stationary sources and mobile sources, but also construction. So we look at our construction duration, and we do studies of what the projected air quality impacts may be, and will we have air quality exceedances on a de minimis or other basis when we're constructing the project. So that actually is in the environmental impact statement.
Question.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It's projection, so it's not an actual reading.
I grant you, I totally agree, I hear what you're saying.
Right.
It doesn't follow through
Right.
when you're actually building the thing to see what the reality is.
Right. So that's a different. Yeah, that's different, because you can actually set that up if you guys really want to do that.
Any other members from the board?
The 400 units of affordability, so I guess really my question is right now, what is the current, like there's a lot of people who have affordable units. Is this going to be a decrease to what's already being, and this is just 400 in the new buildings that are?
This is anywhere between 25 and 30% of the newly built units will be affordable housing pursuant to the city standards and city programs, right? Purely new. Right. This is not the existing Lenox stuff.
So I think we have statements from